right. Well, I believe we're live. Let's give this a try, see how this works. New setup. Tried it yesterday and it didn't quite work. So I wanted to try it again today. I know it's an odd time for a live stream. I haven't done one on a Sunday night in a while. Hopefully some people will be able to join in. If not, this will be up on YouTube and you can take a look at it there. If you are on the live stream, if you've jumped on, jump into the chat and let me know if you can hear what's going on, if you can see what's going on, if the video looks normal, if the audio sounds normal. That's what we want to do. Oh, looks like I have someone in there. Eric, good evening. Can you hear me? Does it sound okay? Let's see how this looks and feels and sounds. Got a few different views on this now, which is something new. So as long as the audio and the video are working properly, then yeah, then it should be a cool new setup. I'm pretty excited for it. So let's see. So if you can hear me, if you're in the chat, let me know how the sound is. Cool, seems good. That's great. If you have questions about what we're doing, pop it in the chat. We're going to be talking a little bit today about multi-tracking audio from a hardware setup, from a live setup into a DAW. We'll be using Ableton today, but this is kind of good for any other DAW. The settings will obviously be a little different. The names of things will be a little different, but so everything will be geared towards Ableton today, but it's valid for anything you want to do. The idea still applies. So let me give you a little tour around quick before we start here as a few people join in. Hey, Art, good to have you. Thanks for joining on a Sunday evening or wherever you are. Maybe it's early Monday morning or I don't know. Let's see. Let me know where you are in the chat, by the way, if you're in the chat. Let me pop that in there and let me know. So we've got this view right now, obviously, so I can chat with you guys. I have a bench view, which is this one. So it's an overview of the live setup. Then I have a combo view with Ableton and me so that I can walk you through some stuff. I can show you my Ableton Live template that I'm using for this. And then also the last view includes the gear, so it can show you a bit of what's going on with the gear as well as as what's going on in Ableton at the same time. So let's see here. Do you like the Torso T1 sequencer by any chance? I actually haven't messed with, I messed with it at Superbooth. I haven't really had a good chance to use it for long term, but I'm actually chatting with the people at Torso. They may be sending me one to use. So I'm excited to give it a try. Haven't gotten a chance to use it. So anyway, oh, you're here in Denver. Nice, we met. Where did we meet? Ah, the synth meetup. Nice. Cool. Well, welcome to a random off hours live stream with me. Yeah, so what we're going to talk about today, again, is connecting your live setup or your hardware machines or things like that with your DAW so that you can multi-track things in. It's the subject of a course that I'm just about to premiere December 5th. If you're interested in signing up for that course, it's 40% off right now for Black Friday. So jump on now. The discount's only good until the next 5 people have signed up. So be one of those and you'll get a good discount off of everything. And you can sign up using the discount for the December, January, or February session of the workshop, which includes some Zoom live chats twice a week as a group where we go over different subjects from the lesson. Then it includes a one-on-one with me for an hour at some point during the month. It includes weekly track feedback. So you can send me the tracks that you're working on using your hybrid live and DAW setup or hardware machine and DAW setup. Send me your tracks and I'll give you some feedback on that. There's an online group that you can join and be a part of. The same course format is what I do for my hardware performance course, which is also available right now. So you can sign up for either one of those. And the discount's good right now, so you want to definitely check it out if you can for Black Friday and get the best discount I've ever done for this stuff. So with this, what we'll talk about first is we're going to talk a bit about the live setup and how I have that organized, which let's do a little bit of a different view here. So the way I have this organized, so you can see, yeah, you can see a bit of this. So my modular setup is multi-tracking in through an audio interface that's right here. It's going out, each one of the channels is going out post-fader into an audio interface, and that audio interface is connected to Ableton, and we'll look a little bit at how that gets routed once we get back over into Ableton. So this is how I multi-track all of the instruments that are inside here coming through this mixer. So I have each one of the 6 channels of the mixer going out through the interface, plus each one of the auxiliary returns is also going out. So 8 tracks going into the DAW that way. So that allows me to use the auxiliary returns for things like the effects that I have and stuff like that. So that's how I'm multi-tracking out here. The Digitact is connected to the computer via USB, and so that's connected to Ableton via Overbridge, and we'll talk a little bit about how that works, how that's set up, how the Overbridge connection works, how you can set it up and make it into a template. We'll go over that in just a little while. And then the Digitone and the Black Box don't have a way to multi-track in right now. The Digitone doesn't, it's the Digitone 2, so it doesn't have Ableton, it doesn't have Overbridge available for it yet, but it will soon. In the meantime, I just have it going in through an auxiliary return into the mixer, so I can still record that those tracks in, just not multi-tracked. But once this is Overbridge capable, then this will just get one USB cable that goes into the computer, and then all of the tracks of the Digitone 2 will be able to go into Ableton via Overbridge. So that'll all be able to be multi-tracked out just like the Digitact. And then the modular, which is generally the hardest part to multi-track, is going out through the Exelon mixer from BoardBrain. And this has an extra module right over here, which is called the I/O. And let me do a little overhead view so you can see that just a little better. So the I/O right here gives you, it's connected via ribbon cable in the back to the Exelon mixer. So it has all 6 stereo channels pre-fader. So even if the fader's down, you still get the full signal sent out that way. It also has all 6 stereo channels post-fader, which is what I'm using because I like to capture the performance and not just the audio. And then you have your returns and a master out. So you can get all of that through this without having to repatch things. So I can take this out, perform live with it, and then bring it back. And once I bring it back, I just plug those into here, and then I can multi-track it. I don't have to unpatch anything in my setup. I can leave it all through the mixer, and then through that mixer and the I/O, it goes out through the audio interface into Ableton. So let's come back over here and look at the Ableton setup. Again, if you're watching online, if you're in the chat, go ahead and post up any questions you have, and I'm happy to go over anything that's not quite making sense or anything that you would like to see. Yeah, happy to do that. So now, now that we're over here in Ableton, I can show you a little bit the way I have the template set up for recording here. So what I have is I have each one of the tracks over here, open those up. Each one of the tracks that's coming out of the audio interface, so coming from the modular, those are each coming into their own channel here. I also have it set up so that I can see the mixer view down below, which is the way I like to see it, although it does crowd up the upper view. It's nice to have that here so you don't have to switch back and forth between this and the clip view. So then within each one of those tracks, so if we just look at the battering ram track here, this has an audio coming from the external in, which is the interface that I just showed you over on the bench. And that's coming into track 1, or in from track 1 of the audio interface. So that way I have each one of these is coming in from their own track from that audio interface, and that's how they get assigned. External instrument, and then you select which of those tracks it is that's coming in. A few other things for this part of the template before we move on to talking about the Overbridge section. One of the things that I like to do with my Ableton templates, whether it's hardware or even just when I'm working in the box, whenever I have a template, I have it set up so that anytime you add a new track, it adds that new track with 2 devices automatically on it. So one is the utility and one is the EQ8, because I just found myself using those 2 all the time, and it just saves you time if you save those as your default new track. So that way, if we go down, every single one of the tracks all the way down has those 2 devices on it. The reason I use those 2 devices all the time, one is the utility allows you to adjust the gain of the individual track without having to adjust the volume. So you can volume mix. I generally use the volume mixing as it relates to the other tracks. So you can see each one's volume kind of in relation to the others. But then the utility is more to adjust the actual overall sound. So some sounds come in extra hot, so you want to bring the gain down just a little bit. You want to attenuate the gain. Other sounds come in a little quiet, so you want to boost up that gain so that you can get everything to kind of a standard level, so that the regular mixer volumes make sense relating to one another. And you don't have to have something jacked way up just to be able to hear it, or whatever. The other big reason for that is that later on, when you're doing arrangement of your track that you're producing, you will often want to automate the volume, or drop things out, bring things in, fade things out in an automatic way through automation. And you don't want to ever automate the volume, because if you automate your volume level and then you go back in and you adjust the volume so that it's mixed according to the other sounds that you have in your track, you lose the automation, or it switches it off. So you have to use one or the other, either the actual volume or an automated volume. With the utility, you can do all of those automations and still have kind of an overall level set for your volume. So that's why that's really important. And then EQ8, I just find that I always use this because I always EQ something in every single track that's out there. So the very first thing that I do is I generally put a low cut at about 25 hertz. Just to take off any of that low stuff that you don't hear. And I just leave that there because I would do that normally at some point in the process anyway. So I figure you might as well just do it now while you've got the device here. Another thing that you can do as well is on the main track, which I don't have it here, which I should have, is I generally put a limiter on the main. Just to catch any weirdness that happens while you're recording. So if you're listening to stuff and the volume is set a certain way, you may have an odd spike of sound or an odd something, and it's nice to have a limiter there so you don't hurt your ears or mess with the sound or anything. So I generally put that in there as well. So that's kind of how I set up the basic tracks. Now, each one of the audio tracks that's coming in from the audio interface that's on the bench, each one of those has all of those same things on it, and they're all set up right here. And then they're all labeled based on whatever the instrument is that's coming in that way. So that way it's really easy and quick to record individual things. The next piece of this, which is a little bit unique to this setup, is the Digitac 2 and having it coming in via Overbridge, which this is the DT2 channel. But if you open it up, you'll see that it has all of the individual tracks all in one, and they're grouped together. So If you're not familiar with how to group, you can just select a track, hold down Shift, select all of them, and then if you right click anywhere, you can select group tracks. And that allows you to group them together. And then what that does is it actually sends all of the audio out from each one of those as a default through the main group channel. So what's cool about this is you can do different types of groups, and then within those groups, you can do group processing. So you could group your drums together, process those one way. You can group, leads together, process them one way. If you have layered sounds, you can group them together, process them together. So it's a pretty interesting, grouping is pretty cool. And in the newer versions of Ableton, I think it started with 11, might have even been 10, but in the most recent versions of Ableton, you can do groups within groups. So let's say I wanted to group these 3 tracks because they were drum tracks. I can click that and group it. And so now I have a group within the group. So these 3 can be processed together, or I could just go back, ungroup them, and now they're back where they went. So that is a good way to organize it. So if you close that up, you only end up with one main track from the instrument. However, the way that's really interesting with Overbridge, if you're not familiar or not familiar with how to set up Overbridge, what you'll generally start with is a MIDI track. And on that MIDI track, you will add the device that speaks with Overbridge for your individual instrument. You need to have the Overbridge engine running, which it will pick up any of the instruments that are live as you're running, and then you would load in, so if we go over here to plugins, let's see here, go to plugins, Electron, and you have all the different devices. You just take Digitac 2, drag it into here, and then you get the Overbridge, which is basically a plug-in version of the hardware device. So it's pretty handy because you can go in here, you can move around samples, you can adjust parameters, you can do all of that stuff in here without having to do it on the machine, or when you do it on the machine, those changes happen in here as well. So then once you have that one MIDI track with your device on it, then you can create a bunch of audio tracks for all of the channels from that device. And when you create an audio track, that audio track is going to ask where the audio is coming from. And so you're going to tell it that the audio is coming from Digitac 2, which is the MIDI track that those are all coming in on. I don't know why I didn't rename that, but that's what it is here. Generally, I rename that to DT MIDI. So that way I know what it is. See, it changed them all up. So now the audio is coming from the Overbridge. So it's coming from that Overbridge connection that's coming into here. And then once you have that Overbridge connection, that track that it's on selected, then you go down and you have the choice of all of the different individual tracks that are coming in through Overbridge. Now, interestingly enough, the Digitac 2 is now 16 tracks. It used to be 8. They just updated it to 16. But because of a limitation in Ableton, you can only bring in 15 tracks via Overbridge. Hopefully this is something they'll be able to change later on. But as of right now, there's just 15 tracks to choose from. So it just means when you're setting up stuff for live performance, maybe avoid 16 for now, if you're going to be using that for multi-tracking in. There are ways around that. Within the Digitac, you can route every track to go out the main, and if you make track 16 be the only one that goes out the main, you can then have that be the one that comes in here. So this one says all instruments, so it's gonna be the only main one. So there's a way around it, but it's not a very eloquent way around it, or elegant way. So it's best to just kind of stick with this, the way this is. So then once you've created that one track that has your MIDI channel as your source, your track 1 as your actual final source, then what I generally do is I just highlight that and do Control D, and that duplicates it, and I'll just duplicate it 15 times, and then just go into each one and rename it, select track 2, rename this, select track 3, rename this, select track 4, and then you're going all the way down. And then you have these devices that are, the audio is routed through Digitac to this main group channel. So they're routed through that as the default. But if you don't want to do that, you can always go in and route things directly to the main, or make it be a send only, or you can have it be whatever you would like. Okay, so that's kind of how you set up Overbridge. And then what you can do, once you have this all set up, then you can take this, and if you go over here to your user library, you can actually drag this over into here, and then you can see it's got it saved as Digitac 2. So now anytime that you want to start a new project, you can always just drag this over into here. It's already there, so it won't do it. But you can drag it over into here, and then you'll already have all of that preset. So you can either save it as a template, or I would say, in addition to saving it as a template, save it as a user template. And so that way you can always use it. So for example, if you have other Electron devices and you're not using them all the time and they can use Overbridge, you can set up the full Overbridge setup for them. So like for the analog rhythm or the syntax or whatever, set up a template for that, and then just save it into your templates over here. And so that way, as soon as you want to add in that, so if I was, for example, to plug in the analog rhythm, I could just drag over an analog rhythm template, and they're already all set up. It's already got the Overbridge connection, has each channel broken out, and has everything labeled. You can even set it up so that each of the channels, if you like to have them already have certain volume levels, if you want them to have certain sends and things like that, you can set them all up however you would like, and then save that as your default template. So any questions about this? If there's any questions, pop them into the chat, and we'll take a look at the chat here and see what's happening. So happy to see me stream again. I'm happy to stream again. I love streaming. It's fun because that way I get to chat with you guys. Let's see. Hi, fan from Mexico City. Love your music. Awesome. Welcome from Mexico City. Bienvenidos. I actually lived near Mexico City for a while, and my wife is from Mexico City. So it's a cool spot and one of my favorite places in the world, like my second hometown after Denver. Stephen O'Connor, hello. James, welcome. Welcome to the stream. Excited for a different aspect. Yeah, me too. I wanted to do something a little, I don't know, new, different, unique, and I thought this was a good way to do it. Can show you a couple of other setups too. This way we can see gear and this, which is what we're going to go into next. And then we've got the gear view, and then of course we've got our regular face shot here. So definitely chuck any of those questions in there if you have any. And then what we'll go over now is what this looks like when we start to record some stuff in, how it works, and then real quickly what we do with it in Ableton once we get all that stuff in there, what it's possible to do with the stuff once we get in there. So let's go back to the gear view here. And yeah, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna open up these tracks, actually not the audio one, I don't really need that one right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and delete that. Then we'll just open up these individual tracks just so that you can see all of them. If you notice, I have the monitoring set to in. You can set this to off if you have issues with latency and your computer's not handling the latency very well from your audio. You tend to get less latency if you switch these off while you record something in. So I know it's not the best because you can't always hear what you're doing, but if you've got a different way to monitor, that's fine. So you can just set these to off, and then you can hear whatever you have coming in. So yeah, so what I would generally do at this point is, before I was going to record something, obviously I want to set the record arm things. So I can highlight all of these tracks here, and then I can record them or record arm them all together. I can do the same in the DTAC because there's no record arm on that first one, so you have to kind of skip it. Then I go to these ones. That didn't highlight all the way to the end. And then I'll just record arm, all of those as well. So now everything's set up and armed to record. So then all I need to do is set this to record. Now, why didn't this start? Well, part of that is because it is set to external. And what that means is the transport, so the run stop, as well as the tempo are being controlled externally, because over in my setup over here, on the Oxy One, you see there's a USB-C cable going out. This is going into the computer. And this is set up so this sends transport, and so that it sends clock as well. And Ableton is set to external clock and transport. So basically it's looking for a signal from the Oxy in order to start, in order to get everything going. So if you notice right now, there's nothing going on, but everything's armed, everything's ready. So if I'm gonna record a live performance, this is kind of where I would start. I would start with everything armed and everything ready to go, so that as soon as I hit play here, you'll see over on Ableton, everything is recording right now. Now there's not anything for it to record because remember, it was set up to record post fader, meaning that if I bring up my kick, you'll notice that the kick starts to record in Ableton. If I bring up, so you can see as I open up that filter, you can see how it got louder there. So it's reacting to everything that's happening here. We also have the opportunity to do that same thing with the detect tracks. So for example here, if I was to open up, you can see that that starts to record on that track. Right, so whatever you open up, that's going to record on that same track in Ableton. And again, bringing instruments in. Right, and then if we take all of those out and we hit stop, Ableton stops as well. And we can come on back over here. And now we can go back into Ableton and you can take a look at everything that was recorded in there. Now, a couple of interesting things to note here. So let's switch these all to off so you can see the individual clips. So for example, if we have our drum clip in here, you may have issues just like this where you end up with some latency. So a little bit of space between what you were recording and here. Now this changes depending on the setup. It changes depending on how much software you have running on your computer. It changes depending on which pieces of gear you're using. There are ways to adjust for this, and I go over that in my course a little bit more in depth. But yeah, there's definitely ways to adjust for this. One thing that you can do as well, though, is you can go into your individual clip that you created here. And you can take off warp and then you can rewarp it. And in some cases that will help enough and bring it in closer to where you need it. If we were to measure this, so if you hold down Command and you measure the start of your drum sound to the beginning of that where it should be, you can see if you look down in the lower left, I can't move the cursor off of it, but down in the lower left, it says duration 0.008. So that's 8 milliseconds of delay, which you may or may not notice. In some cases you will, in some cases you won't. It depends on the instrument. But if that is the case, then you can go ahead and adjust that. Sometimes it's just a matter of adjusting the individual track while you're, or once you've gotten it in here. And other times it's a matter of adjusting everything within your complete setup and then saving that as part of your template. But I wanted to leave this in to show you how you can see the latency, how you can measure the latency, and then what you can do about it afterwards. Now, another thing to do with this as well is once you've got your full clip in here, you may not want to keep the whole thing. If it's just going to be a kick that's going to be repeating, you might just want to take a section of it that works really well and say, oh yeah, I like this particular section. Let's try rewarping that again. Yeah, so if you've got something, this is still not super aligned, that's actually in advance right now. But you can take that section and then you can duplicate it. So if you do have one good section, you can duplicate that and find it. Otherwise, there's ways that we can adjust that, and we'll go into that in much more depth in the course, but it's something that's worth talking about here. So anyway, so you've got full instrument tracks. So now what you can do is, if you've performed this in, so we just recorded this really quickly, but let's say this was a performance of a whole track or even a whole live set, then you can go back in here and you have a whole lot of material here. So either you really loved your performance and you want to just kind of save it as what it is, you can go in and individually process each one of the tracks. So if there's something a little bit off, or if you wanted to change a level, or if you wanted to add a different effect, or if you wanted to change up the sound a little bit by adding in, I don't know, a bit crushing effect or some other effect, or adding in an echo or a reverb or something that you didn't have in your performance, you can make those adjustments here and you can automate, or you can keep it just the way it is if you want to save your performance exactly the way it was. Another great use for this is when you have, let's just grab a little section of what was going on here with the Archer's rig. So we can take a look at this. So let's solo this. This section here. So we can go ahead and play this section. Still on external, still waiting for some. So that's what was recorded from the Archer's rig, is this thing. So now we can go into this and we can EQ that. We can make adjustments to it. We can change up that sound any way we want. Then we can start to add audio effects to it. So let's say we wanted to add an echo to it. Or let's say we wanted to saturate that a little bit. Put that before here. Or we can add something really interesting to it, like the corpus, which can give us some interesting sounds. So now we've got something totally different than what we started with. So as a reminder, this is what we have now. And if we take off those effects, we go back to the original sound that we had. So we recorded something in that was interesting from the live setup, but maybe it wasn't exactly our final thing that we wanted, or maybe we got another idea, or maybe you just want to take this one and duplicate it to another track and double it up so you can keep the original sound and mess with it. Or maybe you want to just have this be going to a reverb set and then using that reverb as just an atmosphere. And so basically when you record a ton of material like what we did here, then you all of a sudden have your own sample packs. You have your things that you can use in production. So you can either produce this, which is here, or you can take these individual pieces and parts, take bits of them, load them back into, let's say, the 1010 black box, which I'm using in my live setup, and then I can use those bits and pieces of things that I've recorded within here in my live set again. So you can use one back and forth. And that's a big focus of what the course is about, is how to use a live setup for production and how to use production in a live setup. And also how to go back and forth between the two, because they really are complementary. I mean, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, it has to be DAW-less. If it's not DAW-less, it's blah, 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 whatever. For me, that's just dumb. There are certain things that a DAW is way better at than hardware, and there's certain things that hardware is way better at than a DAW. So use everything for its strength, so you have all the possible tools in your arsenal so that you can actually make the best possible music, rather than just making things that are, strictly DAW-less or strictly with those limitations. Maybe you want the limitations of performing only or using only those instruments, great. But then you can use this as a way to then record that in, and then you can finalize things. You can then mix and master tracks. You can change up level sets. Maybe you didn't hear it quite exactly right because of your monitoring when you were performing it. But then once you get it into the DAW, you say, oh yeah, well, I've got this and that, I can change this up, I can, bring this out more, and maybe you'll find a sound that you don't really, particularly like anymore within here, where you can change it, like what we just did. You could modify the sounds, and yeah, you can mix and match it. So there's a lot of power to going back and forth between DAW and a hardware setup. So, all of that said, who's got any questions? Pop those into the chat, and let's talk about stuff. Let's chat. That's the best thing about these live streams. We get to interact a little bit, and it's not just a talking head of me like, here's how you do the thing, and that's it. So let's see here. Thinking of switching DAWs from FL to Ableton. Any input? Yeah, I can give you some input. I actually switched from FL to Ableton, but years and years and years ago. I actually started off with FL when it was still Fruity Loops, and with Fruity Loops 1. At that time, there was, I can't remember what it was. It might have been Guitar Center, or it was some store, and they had free CDs of Fruity Loops 1 for people to try. So I got it, and it was actually the first DAW I ever had, and I took it home and I learned how to use it, and it was great. I enjoyed it, but then I kind of wanted to move on to something that was a bit more kind of fully fleshed out, and at that time Fruity Loops or FL Studio really wasn't. So I switched to Ableton at, I think, about Ableton 4 or something like that, and then I've been using Ableton ever since as my DAW of choice. But I have used Bitwig a little, I've used Logic a little bit, I've used Reason, I've used Pro Tools, but I've always kind of come back to Ableton because for me, it just clicks well. Like the workflow really works well for me. Yeah, I've always liked it, so I just keep coming back to it. So, but they're all good. Like every DAW is kind of the same. They all do the same things. Each one has different things that it may do a little bit better or a little bit more interesting. The thing really with Ableton that makes it interesting is this view, the clip view. So you can see I've got all of those same inputs over on this side. And then, oops, wait, I need to change my view, don't I? You're not looking at what I'm looking at. Here we go. There we are. So over here in the clip view, so I have each one of those same tracks with those same inputs. So if I was to go through and I was to arm individual tracks here, like this one's armed, so I could record into this. Yeah, it's recording in right now. So if I was to arm these, like the little circle means it's armed, and then if I do this up above, and then if I was to go into those tracks while I was playing, I can record those, what I'm playing on the live rig into these little clips rather than recording it into that arrangement view. I would use the arrangement view if I was going to record an entire track, but if I just have a loop that I want to get started with and I've got a whole bunch of instruments that are making that loop really interesting, I'll play those on the setup, quickly record them into here, and then I can start arranging things. You can move these clips around once you have them in here. So then it can be, you can set them up as scenes as well. So like if you were to push play over here, that will play everything in that row. So you can set up like, I want these instruments for the intro, then the next section, the next section, next section. And then if you hit record and then just go from scene to scene to scene to scene down the row, you'll record that over into this view. So it's kind of a live performance way to record in. So when I'm recording or when I'm producing in the box, that's generally how I do it. I will do all of the stuff in the clip view where I'm just kind of coming up with ideas and bouncing things around and shuffling them around. And then once I have kind of the pieces and parts that I want to use in a track, then I'll make them into some rough scenes, some rough kind of sections of the song. And then I'll just hit record and I'll go through those and I'll move them over. And if there's like an individual part I want to bring in, you can just click on that and it'll bring in that individual part. And all of that records over into the arrangement view. So then you have your arrangement basically done for you without having to do it with a full live setup. You can do it just internally within the DAW. So because of that, that's one of the reasons why I kind of gravitated towards Ableton and have stuck with it, because it's just a really handy way to work. And it works really well for me because as with kind of the live performance side of things, I prefer having a performance-based workflow rather than kind of a left to right arrangement view as a way to write tracks. For me, doesn't really click very well. For me, it feels kind of like I'm writing an essay, and that takes away a bit of the creativity for me. I do like the arrangement view once I'm trying to arrange things out, but getting a rough version of that by performing and playing something live is really interesting for me. So that's why I tend to use that version of Ableton. So let's see what else we have going here. Look back down to the chat here. Maybe I missed this. Is the modular going into the computer via USB? Yes and no. So it is going in via, it's from the mixer going into this output module right here. And then all of these cables are the individual track cables that are each going into a different channel in this audio interface that's right here. And then via USB, that's connected to the computer and connected to Ableton. So that way, everything can go into Ableton on its own individual track, and then it gets tracked out within Ableton because the audio interface is recognizing each one of those inputs. So the modular's all going in from that audio interface, multi-tracked out, and then the Electron, well, the Digitac, but soon to be the Digitone 2 as well, those are going in via Overbridge. So that way I can get basically once the Digitac 2 can do Overbridge, I'll be able to, from my live rig, just the live rig alone, I'll be able to multi-track in right around 40 tracks. And obviously you would never use 40 tracks all at the same time going in. It would be kind of a cluster. But what it does is it allows you to have all 40 tracks recording, even if there's nothing happening on the track. And then throughout an entire performance, you can bring different pieces of that and different instruments and different tracks in and out. And because you're doing that, because you're bringing those things in and out, then when you go back into Ableton, you have everything laid out for you and you can break individual parts of that up as tracks, or you can remaster, remix those things, you can edit them, you can pull parts out, you can add parts in. So there's a lot that you can do by putting things in a divided kind of multi-track way, rather than just recording in, a stereo output from your main of your DAW. So yeah, so that's how I do it. Switch from FL to Bitwig. Yep, Bitwig's cool. Bitwig and Ableton, for me, feel really similar. Bitwig has a couple things I like more than Ableton. Ableton has a couple things I like more than Bitwig, but they're very similar and they're both great. Really, really good. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. You're right. First to like the video. Thanks, Art. Yeah, give it a like so that more people can see it. Missed the recording part. There we go. I already went over that. Reaper's only $50. Yeah, for sure. I never really gelled with Reaper. I tried it a couple times. Didn't work really well for me, but I know people that swear by it. So it just, again, the thing, just like with the hardware, any software that you get for making music, you just want to make sure that it doesn't get in your way. So if it's quick and easy to get ideas down, if it's quick and easy to arrange and organize and change the sound of things, and if it inspires you with the workflow and you don't feel like you're kind of fighting against the workflow, it's great. And it doesn't matter which one it is, use whichever one's good for you. I like Ableton. I have friends that love Logic. I have friends that love FL. I have friends that love Bitwig. I have friends that love Reaper, Pro Tools, all of them. So they all work really well. Let's see here. What are your thoughts about making changes every 8 or 16 bars? I noticed that most DAWs performers do not use transitions at regular intervals. I've been trying to perform with changes at every 8 bars, but it's very stressful. It brings me anxiety. I get that. Should I abandon this idea? Well, I mean, for me, and again, this is different for everybody, and it's really depends on you personally. But for me, I think that I perform, all my performances are improvised, and so I'm kind of performing from a gut instinct point of view. That said, I've been a DJ for 35 years, so my gut instinct comes from a place of, I have 3 decades of listening to music in clubs and playing it, so you just have this kind of like, without even thinking about it, you are, you're making changes in a time that makes sense. Without trying to count, you're counting. Like you're not even thinking about it. And it's like, okay, this feels right. And most of the time when it feels right, it is right. Now I would tell you on the flip side of that, sticking to that 8 or 16 bar thing, there's positives and negatives to that. The positive is when you're on the dance floor, you can get into a groove, you can start to follow along, and you can kind of lock into something that's hypnotic, that you know when it's coming, and that anticipation of knowing and then having it come, there's something satisfying about that when you're listening to music. However, that can get really boring and monotonous very quickly, particularly with techno, the type of music that I make. And because it can get really boring and monotonous, you want to try to find ways that you can mix that up. I remember seeing a video a long time ago from Richie Houghton, and he said that he intentionally, when he's playing live, he intentionally doesn't come in and out and bring things in and out on the 8 and the 16 and the 32 and the 64, because when you do that, you kind of jolt the audience into paying attention again. Even if it's subconscious, and they'll get caught right back up with the count again. So that way you can come up with ways that make it sound interesting rather than having it always be the same thing. Now, another thing that's really key in the type of music that I make is particularly like the really hypnotic side of techno, is to use things that are polymetric. So you might have something that's repeating on 4s and 8s and 16s and 32s, and it's sticking to that same thing. But then you may have other parts that are repeating on 5s or 7s or 9s or 12s or whatever. So they will kind of phase in and out of sync with your main elements. And because you do that, you keep something that is very repetitive and kind of hypnotic. It also makes it interesting. So it keeps it from getting boring at the same time as having it be repetitive in a way that you want. So again, it depends on the kind of music you're making. I mean, if you're making pop music, yeah, you 8, 16s, 32s, because that's what people want. They don't want to be necessarily challenged. If you're making dance floor music, house, techno, things like that, you want to have some things that are repetitive and that are kind of foundational that people can count on when they're listening and when they're dancing to it. So it keeps them kind of in the groove. But then you also want to have things that are outside of that groove and not repeating on your flat numbers in order to make it more interesting and in order for it to stay interesting over time. Because that kind of resets people's clocks as they're listening to things in their head, and that allows them to listen longer without having something sound monotonous. So let's see what else. Any other questions? Pop those in the chat and I will be happy to answer them. Sounds a bit like a song. Yeah. Yeah, so basically back to the subject matter at hand, talking about the using this for live recording. Another way that you can use the stuff once you have it in here is you can rearrange things. So you can move things around, just take individual sections, move those around, and then you can pull parts out and just take those over and move them in. And then you can take sections like this and put them together. And then you can play. And it may not be what you performed, but it may be something that's interesting again. So you can go in and split these. Let's move this over here and then add that in as well and see what we've got here. So that was when we swapped out those drum sounds on the return. Then you've got other things that were over here in the Digitact. So you can pull out a piece of this, split that, and move it back over into our section here that we're working on as well. Oops. Right? So it gives you a chance to move things around and rearrange things in a way that you may not have done while you were performing. So, I mean, obviously this is a bit clunky and not everything is exactly synced up, but it gives you a way to go in and try things out, test out individual sounds, see what this one sounded like. And again, maybe you didn't like a certain sound the way that it was. So I'm gonna pull these all out. So maybe you have something like this bass sound and you want to use that for something else. Maybe you don't want to have that be your bass line, but maybe you want to use just that first section and then have that be a thing. So then you can cut it up into sections, you can create something new, and then you can go in and you can EQ that. Right, so you can go in and do something like that. Then if you wanted, you can add in, well, if we go just into audio effects, then you can add in things like, again, echo. So you see, you can turn that one bass part, maybe it wasn't something interesting that you liked before, but then you can turn that into something interesting here. And who knows, maybe you just end up combining that with something that's like, you know, let's see here, let's just add a kick in here. Let's just put that on a random track here. Right? And see, now we've got something brand new and different that wasn't what we started off with in the live setup, but we probably wouldn't have used this, or we wouldn't have come up with this if it wasn't for that original live set piece that we moved into there. Then we can start to think about adding in other pieces of the live set. So that, that Archer's Rig sound. And then you can even go in and adjust that, shorten that up a bit. You can shorten the reverb off of it, add a little bit more of it back in. Let's pick some random hat sound. I don't know what this is gonna sound like, but hey, why not, right? Yeah, probably not what I wanted. Yeah, I like that one better. Let's see here, any percussion? Yeah, there we go. Right, and before you know it, you've built out something using some of the live stuff that you've brought in, using some loops that you may have already in your DAW, and then you can always take some of these packs from somewhere else and some of these samples from somewhere else. Maybe it was from another portion of this recording, or maybe it was from a totally different place. You know, maybe it was from another recording that you did somewhere else, and you wanted to bring something else in from another performance or from another recording that you did. So it's a great way to make samples, make sample packs, make things in a really creative way, because as you're making them in the DAW, as you're using the DAW to enter stuff in and record stuff in, you're gonna make movements and changes and you know, automations and open filters and change up decays in a different way than you would if you were kind of clicking and dragging with a mouse in your DAW. So this is a way that you can combine those two things to make your music sound human, because you actually made it as a human, made those changes, but at the same time, you can use the organizational stuff and the power that a DAW has. I mean, obviously, a DAW can do way more than any hardware setup, right? Because you've got like infinite plugins, infinite effects, infinite processing, all of those things that you can do. So you can use them creatively, you can use them to fix things, all of that stuff. So because of that, it's great to be able to take advantage of that power. Now, the real strength of using hardware in the first place is to be able to enter things in and use things in a way that is playable, and you're using the playing of the instrument to actually enter the instrument into the DAW, enter the audio into the DAW, and then you've got those pieces and parts that are much more interesting to play with. Now, when you have something set up like this, that's a multi-track from a hardware setup, it's also a great way to create samples, just like what we were talking about. So let's say you wanted to do a performance using just a sampler, just a Digitact or an Octatrack or an MPC or a Deluge or something like that that uses samples. Well, you can take all of your hardware, you can set it up to multi-track this way, and you can just hit record, and you can mess around, and you can play and experiment and come up with new ideas, make cool things that work really well together. And then when you're done, you can go back into your DAW and you have all those pieces waiting for you that you used, and you can chop them up just like this, make them into individual clips that you can enter into your sampler that you can perform live with, or you can re-edit them as you saw here. So like we re-edited, go back here. So we re-edited this bass part that was multiple sections, and then we edited those 4 pieces together, so you can go in and make any changes that you want to make in those individual instruments, or in those individual parts, and then you can go back through, you can consolidate that. Now that's one new sample again, and then you can do different kind of things with it. You can chop that up, you can morph it, change it. You can add, fade ins and fade outs. You can make it come in and out like an effect. You can do all sorts of interesting stuff with it once you have it in the DAW. But the idea is that you didn't just have to rely on some sample pack that you bought, or you didn't just have to rely on things that you think of when you're working in a DAW just with the creativity of a mouse and a click, where you could actually do things live performatively using hardware with kind of a tactile feedback and have it be fun to play. And that fun and that creative moment of improvising with your machines can help you create some really interesting things that you can use in the DAW. So yeah, so that's my favorite part about this. So let's go back to the chat here. If you have any questions, please chuck them in. Happy to answer whatever. Let's see, just signed up for the course. Sweet, Peter, glad to have you. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. If you want to sign up for the course, definitely sign up now. Like I said, it's 40% off right now, and that goes away as soon as the next 5 people sign up. So I guess now it's 4 because Peter just signed up. So definitely jump on, go to circlelive.com/courses, where there's a link in the description of this video, and that'll take you to the course sign up, and then you just enter in Black Friday as the code at checkout, and that'll take the 40% off the price. So, and you can do that with any of the courses. So if you're interested in the production course, which is what we're talking a little bit about here, that is, signups are open for December, January, February for the production course. And you can use the discount for any of those months. So you don't need to do it just right now and get started right now. So maybe you're not planning on having any time until February. Okay, we'll sign up now, get the discount, but sign up for the February course. And so that'll be easier. And then the same goes for my performance course, which is also open December, January, February. All of those cohorts are all open as well. And so you can sign up for any of those. And that's really geared around improvised live performance and building a live performance setup and performing with it in an improvised way, or in however much improvisation you would like to to perform with. Like some people don't want to improvise at all. Some people want to be totally crazy about it like I am. But yeah, let's see here. But excellent. I'm glad to have you in the course, Peter. Art, does it make sense to use the Oxy one by itself with a DAW and VSTs? Totally. I don't always produce with my hardware. Like sometimes I like to produce in the box. I like to remix in the box. It's just a lot more fun to be able to actually spread things out. Like it's almost like you have things out on your table and you're cutting them and moving them around. It's kind of like that in arrangement view when you've got stems for a remix. And using the Oxy is great because just one cable, you're connected to Ableton. And then you can just set it as your MIDI input device. You can route any of the channels in the Oxy to multiple MIDI channels. You can control tons of VSTs, you can control CC messages, you can control everything from the Oxy, which is great because one of the big drawbacks of most DAWs, I mean, Ableton for sure, but I think most DAWs in general, the sequencers in them are pretty awful. They aren't very inspirational and they're not the best. I would say there's a couple of exceptions within Ableton that I use every once in a while, the 186 and a couple of others, but I have to say, for the most part, I would much rather use a hardware sequencer, particularly the Oxy one, or something like the Hapax or the Torso T1. They're all really good for doing things in a really inspirational, creative way that you wouldn't necessarily get from a sequencer and a DAW. And my sequencer of choice is the Oxy. And what's great about it too is that I can take the Oxy one when, if I'm traveling or if I'm hanging out on the couch, I can send Bluetooth MIDI out to a soft synth in my phone and then just listen with Bluetooth headphones. And I can write out patterns in the Oxy and be like, oh yeah, that's cool bass line. Oh, I like that drum pattern or whatever. And then when I get into my studio, I can connect that one USB-C cable to the DAW, and then I can send any of those patterns that I created on my phone into the DAW to any VSTs that I want to, or I can connect it to my modular rig, or I can connect it to my hardware synths, and I can just send those all out and have that thing that I created just via Bluetooth MIDI using my phone. I can send it out to a full studio and it becomes completely connected with everything else. So it's a great way to sketch and write ideas and then take them into your hardware or software world. Let's see here. Hey, George from Austria. Nice, welcome. I've been to Austria. I went to Kitzbühel and watched the Hahnenkamm. That was super fun when I was living in Switzerland. Which interface do you use? I couldn't recognize it. Love your streams and your will to share your knowledge. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, George. I enjoy doing the streams too. What is that? Cancel. I don't want to restart my computer. So what interface do I use? So the one that I have, I actually have two interfaces in my studio. So if we go back to this view, you can see both of them. So this one right here is the Tascam US20X20. So it's a 20 in, 20 out capable audio interface. Tascam doesn't make this anymore. I think it's the 18i20 now. I think they changed it a little bit. But it's the 20i20. So it can be rack mount or it can be desk mount. So that's what I have here. So that's what's taking everything in from the modular. Then I also have over here another Tascam, coincidentally. This is the Model 24 mixer, and this is also an audio interface. And so that takes care of everything else that's in my studio. So I have on one side, I'll move this around, that's all the hardware stuff that we're looking at right now. So like the hardware rig and then my larger modular setup. And then over on this side, I have other synths. So I have a Polybrute and an SH101 and a few others that I use as well. So all of those go in through, all of the other synths go in through the Tascam or sorry, they're both dash cams, go in through the Model 24. So then I can split those out and put those multi-track in as well. But right now I have this set up just to use my hardware live rig. So that's why I'm using the 20x20 to come in and Overbridge to get things multi-tracked in. So yeah, those are the audio interfaces. Thanks. Hey Art, thank you so much for the tip. I appreciate that. So nice for positive energy and informative lectures. Thank you very much. I'm a pretty positive person, so I appreciate that. But thanks. Every little bit helps. So thanks for the support. I do appreciate that. Let's see, what else? Techno is a track for me. Got it. I don't know what that means, but okay. The workflow in a DAW can easily mess with your head. You can get, decision paralysis because you have so many choices. That's why one of the things that I love to do in Ableton, and this is recently within the last, I can't remember, I don't know, 3 or 4 versions. They have these little collections over here in the top left corner. And so I have those broken out to things that I like to use. So audio effects, soft synths, sample packs for techno and house, effects, different racks, and then MIDI effects. So I just disconnected one of my hard drives, so that's why some of those aren't showing up. But like if you go into the audio effects section, these are the most common audio effects that I use, rather than going into the audio effects over here and you've got way more. So anything that has a little red dot next to it is one of the favorites that I use a lot. Sorry, excuse me, that I use a lot. So I use that to kind of keep it simpler. So if you go into instruments, actually, or into plugins, so like you can go in and I have like the whole Arturia collection, a whole bunch of different software that's in there, but I take the ones from that I really like, right? So like the 2600, the CS80, Diva, things like that. These are the synths that I use the most. So I do that in order to kind of reduce down my options so that I don't always have 50 million things to choose from. I do the same with samples too, where I will take my favorite kicks and put them all in one thing, and I'll always go back to those favorites, or my favorite hats, or my favorite whatever, so that I don't have to go scrounge through 1,000 different kicks and waste my time just finding those, because that's where I find that it really can stop you from making music when you have all those options. So if you reduce down the options to only your very favorites and your very best things, that can give you it can help you avoid the decision paralysis. So yeah. Let's see, I missed the first 30 minutes of this video, but I see sample labeled battering RAM 79. Does this mean you're creating battering RAM sample packs? No, I mean, yes and no. So this was, that was just the name that it gave to that based on where it was in the section that I pulled it out of. So yeah, it just did it like that. But I will be making sample packs, so yes, but this is not for that. So I have a sample pack coming out soon that is all of my favorite drums, and then another one that is just kind of like a Circo techno sample pack that uses a lot of my favorite sounds, and so that way you can pop that into a sampler and make stuff that sounds like my gear. So that way, if you like that kind of thing, if you don't have the gear, it can help. Let's see here. James, any particular utilities or VSTs you use on master to monitor LUFS? Yes. That's a great question, and I will show you. I don't have it on here. Let's see here. Plugins. There we go. This is the new one. I think this is the new one. For some reason, I have a new and an old. Oh no, this is the old one. I should delete the old one. This is the new one. Yeah, so if you want to monitor LUFS or LUFS, this Julian loudness meter, I love it, and it's free. It's a free download. I can't remember exactly where it came from, but if you just Google Julian loudness meter, It's a free download, and I will put that often on my master. And then as we play stuff like here, you get this coming out of your master channel. So this will give you your integrated LUFS, but it also gives you short-term peak and then a loudness range and a dynamic range, which is really nice as well. And then it tells you kind of like where your momentary maximums are and stuff like that. So then if you take something like the limiter, actually, I'm gonna turn the volume down over here so I don't blow you guys out when I do this. But if you were to take the limiter and jack that up, so you can see that pulls your LUFS up. You can see where you have your peaks here, and you can set a maximum that you want to hit, and so it'll tell you every time you hit that within your mix. But it's great because as you change up things, you can clear your view, and then you can go back in and take a look at it again. So it gives you a great thing. When I'm mastering, I use this to monitor LUFS, and then I use the BX meter to monitor true volume, which I'll just put over here on the side. And this gives you your peak, your RMS, and then it gives you a dynamic range in between those. So I use these two for monitoring when I use those two for monitoring when I'm mastering, so that I can see both of those things. So I can see my actual true volume levels, and I can see my loudness, my LUFS loudness levels. But yeah, so I tend to use both because I like to know what both of them are, because if you just know your loudness, you're not going to know your peak volume. And if you just know your peak volume, you're not going to know your loudness. And it's good to know both, so you can get your tracks to where you want them mastered out. Let's see. Does it go through your modular mixer? Does what go through my modular mixer? Let's see here. Trying to see where your last question was. I don't know. Go ahead and pop that in. Oh, you know what? Sorry about that. I just realized that I went through that whole thing and didn't show you everything. Oh, you know what? It's not showing. Is it showing? Let's see here. It's not showing them anyway. Sorry about that. I'll put in the chat, that's the name of the thing that you search for. There you go, Julian loudness meter. So Jendrik, just put in what you mean, does what go through my modular mixer? And I'll be happy to answer that. Any particular LUFS or decibel targets you're trying to hit? So peak volume, I like to keep the peak volume at, so that it's maxing out. So if I'm mastering, so it's going to be, this is going to be the track that is going to go out, that I'm going to release or that I'm going to play out. If I'm mastering, I want that to peak out at like negative 0.2 or 0.3 dB. Just so that it's not going to clip if there's ends up being something weird that's there. Then as far as LUFS, if it's going to be a track that's going to be listened to kind of in a hi-fi headphone stereo kind of thing at home, then LUFS, you can be in like the 12, 14, negative 12, negative 14 range. If it's going to be played in a club or played by a DJ, and it's going to be played with other professionally mastered tracks, you want to be -9, -8. So you want it really, really loud. And not because that's necessarily better. I wish that wasn't the case, but because that's what everybody else is mastering to now. If you want your track to fit in with other tracks in a DJ set, and if you're playing music for DJs, you want it to be in that kind of like -9, -8 range, which is super loud. And it's difficult to do. It's difficult to get it there. It takes a lot of practice. So yeah, let's see. The individual channels into the interface. Yes, I'll show you guys that really quickly here. Can go back to the overhead view. Everything from the mixer goes into this I/O module through the back. There's a cable on the back. So not only do I have these going out as part of the performance, but that same signal is also coming out post fader through all of these cables, and each one of those cables goes into a different channel in the interface. And then when it comes time for me to go perform a live show, I can just pull all these cables and leave that at home, and I haven't had to repatch anything from the mixer. In past iterations of my setup, if I wanted to send out things multi-track, I couldn't use the mixer that was in my setup. I would have to take the output from the module and go straight into the audio interface. So then you lose the ability to actually perform, and you can record individual sounds, but you're not actually able to record a performance. And with this, because with the I/O from the Exelon, I can do all stereo channels pre-fader or post-fader. I have these going out post-fader, so the recording into Ableton gets all of the volume changes that I do during a performance. So it's not just the track as a whole thing, and then I have to go back into the DAW and try to recreate the performance. I can actually do both. If I had a bigger audio interface and I had more track channels, I could then send out the pre-fader as well as the post fader at the same time and still perform them. And so that way I would have all of it in the DAW, but that just takes more channels in an audio interface, which I don't have right now. So I could, but less important for me to do that right now. So yeah, so that's how that worked. Let's see here. Yeah, -13 is a target. So the reason why a lot of people put -13 is because they're putting their songs on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, or Apple Music or whatever, and streaming services and stuff. And those streaming services will bring it to -13 anyway. And sometimes that can damage as they reduce down, it can damage the sound of your file. So if that's what you're doing it for, -13 is a good target, and that's kind of the same for that kind of home hi-fi. I usually shoot for like 14-ish, 14, 15. But yeah, to play in a club or festival or whatever, if a DJ is going to be playing it on a proper sound system, then it needs to be like -8, -9 for it to sound right on those things. And you know, it would sound great at -13, -14 as well, but the DJ would have to then gain up compared with everything else they were playing, and that becomes a hassle. And so you would just avoid that track from now on. So if you want your tracks to get played, they need to fit with what everybody else is giving them. They need to fit with the rest of the master tracks that are out there. So yeah, you're welcome. What else? Any other questions? Pop those in the chat. Feel free. This is that's what these things are for. This isn't just for me to yap along. This is it's for me to help you guys out. So if you have any questions, anything about this setup, about the courses, about any of that stuff, now's the time. So feel free to jump in and yeah, ask anything you want. Ask away. Ask me anything, as everybody does on YouTube. I actually did one of those a couple years ago. I should do one again. Ask me anything. But we can do it in here. Ask me anything you want. Anything about music or not music. I don't care. I'm open to whatever. I am a fairly open book. So happy to answer whatever questions you have. Another thing that you can do, let's see, Torso T1 or Oxy 1? Oxy 1 for me. I will be trying the T1 coming up soon. They're sending me one on loan to try out to see if I like it. But I have tried it a bit before, and I'm a huge fan of the Oxy 1. It has revolutionized the way I play music. And I was really looking for a hardware sequencer, and I looked at the T1, I looked at the Hapax, I looked at the Oxy. Yeah, I looked at all of them, and really the Oxy was the hands down winner. Like, it wasn't even close for me. So who knows? Maybe the others have changed since then. But yeah, for me, the Oxy one is the Mac Daddy of all the sequencers that are out there right now. And happy to chat about why if you want. Let's see, Hapex. Yes, Hapex is good. It is good. However, I am more of an Oxy One fan than a Hapex fan. But again, it all comes down to you and your workflow. Like, what may be great for me may not be great for you, or vice versa. So find the thing that you gel with, the piece of gear that is, you know, the workflow just works for you, and use that one, whatever that is. Let's see, the Digitech 2 has 4 machines, 2 FM and 2 others. Those 2 others, are they, I think you're talking about the Digitone 2 and not the Digitech 2. Yes, so it has 4 machines. It has the regular FM machine, which is exactly the same as the one in the old, the Digitone 1, even to the point where all of your projects, if you move them over using transfer, they will all open and you can use them just exactly the same in the Digitone 2, and then you can actually build them out. Because like if they were 4 tracks, now you've got another 12 tracks that you can add to them, which is pretty sweet. So yeah, so that the main FM engine is exactly the same as the original engine that was in the Digitone 1. Then they added a second FM engine, which is called FM Drum, and it's basically the same engine, but the interface and the controls are different, so they're more. Well, here, why don't I just show you? Yeah. So if you go into the machines, so you have FM Tone, FM Drum. So the FM Tone is basically the classic one. That's what it was. FM Drum. So let's see, if you look at FM Tone, you're going to have certain parameters within the synth section that you could work with. But then if you were to switch that up and go to the FM Drum, you have different parameters. So it's not really, it doesn't look the same. You can get to all of those different parts, but really things like the algorithm are much smaller up here, and everything else is based off of the waves, the sweep time and depth and feedback and folding. So it's really set up in order to make drums and be much better at making drums. So you have things like the decay of the body of the drums and phase and all kinds of stuff like that. So everything is really designed for making drums from the FM world. Then there's Wavetone, which this is a wavetable synth. So you have wave 1 and wave 2, and then you have phase distortion, and so you can move those around and you can mix those 2 waves together. So you can change up the waves, and it kind of morphs through a whole bunch of different waves from one to the other. And then it's basically like a dual oscillator, so you can decide which or how much of that oscillator that you want to include in that. And then the last one is the Swarmer, which I'm not sure if this is the same one that was in the Syntax. I can't remember. But anyway, so it's basically a swarm synth. So it's got 2 different waveforms, and then you can also have multiple instances like of unison of that, and you can decide how many, how broad you want them, how much you want them to impact, and then you can animate it using wave folding, and then you have noise that you can modulate it with as well. So a lot of different things. Oh, and then you have a -1 and -2 octave. So it's basically a way to layer different waves into one synth sound. So yeah, so they're all digital. 2 are FM, 2 are wavetable. The wavetable is the Swarm one, so you have multiple instances of unison, and you can spread so that you can get kind of detuning, which is really fun. And then the other one is a more traditional 2 oscillator wave. So yes, that's what those are. Is the whole machine FM based? Not all FM based, but all digital. So you do have 2 FM engines, and then the other 2 are dual oscillator, but they're dual oscillator digital and not frequency modulating. Different ways to do that. Let's see, Hapax works for me, but I can see why it's not for others. Yeah, it's a great one. It was actually my number 2 after the Oxy one. And one of the biggest things for me was the size and the fact that it's not battery powered. So for me, I love to be able to use this portable and battery powered. And because I travel a lot for my shows, all of my gear has to fit into hand luggage to carry on the plane. And so another big box like the Hapax just wasn't in the cards for me. So being able to have the Oxy One has been amazing. I love it. And I also love the connectivity of the Oxy One, and being able to have 48 channels of outgoing MIDI is really super powerful as well, if you're going to control things other than just modular. Let's see here. Been deep into the Hapax, and it seems only the Oxy can keep up. Yeah, they're really the 2 best. I would say the T1 is right in there as well. Very different workflow for a very different style of user, but also very, very powerful. A really, really great sequencer as well. Hey Ed, what's going on? Imagine this. See, we're streaming at night now. I'm doing all kinds of weird stuff. Trying to get these courses filled up. I want to get everybody in there and take these courses because I think it's going to be super valuable for everybody. So anyway, do you ever use MIDI keyboards instead of the Oxy One? No. I do have some MIDI keyboards. I have right over there, I have a leaning up against that I never ever use. I've got an Arturia 61 key full keyboard. I am an awful keyboard player, really awful. I'm much better with sequencers. I'm much better with programming music that way and kind of playing sequencers as instruments. I love being able to use sequencers in keyboard-ish modes. So like you can on the Ableton Push 3s, like you can also in the Oxy, you can set it to play it like a keyboard, but I don't play it like a traditional keyboard because I'm really bad at that. So yeah. Anyway, let's see. Definitely wished I could take it with me on the go. Yeah, I mean, that's, for me, Peter, between the Oxy and the Hapax, that's the biggest decider. Both very powerful, both awesome. They're both great. I actually love that the Hapax had 2 screens because it gives you a lot of power to be able to see what's going on in the other screen and not have to switch around. So yeah, it's, I would definitely be interested in that. It's just the Oxy for me. I love the form factor, the build quality. I also love all the upgrades that Manuel's constantly coming up with, all the different types of sequencers, and then really the MIDI out. Being able to have 48 channels of separate outgoing MIDI is really super powerful as well. Love that. Do you use the Oxy as master clock? Yes, I do. So the Oxy has, on the back of it here, I have this cable is a CV clock out that's going into the PAM's workout, and then that's clocking other things like the delay timing in the Ghost and the Meta and a couple other things. So this is splitting up and dividing clock there. But that's coming out via CV clock. Then I also have MIDI that's coming out of the Oxy, so MIDI out, and that's going out, and that's clocking the Digitact, the Digitone, and the black box. So that way, transport works for all of them. One thing starts everything, including the clocks here. And then I have this USB-C cable that's connected to the computer so that this clock and transport are also clocking Ableton. So that way everything comes out at once. Makes it all kind of centralized. So that way while I'm performing, I've like the Oxy one is really the center of my whole live performance rig. So it's sequencing the modular, it's sequencing tracks in the Digitact, it's sequencing tracks in the Digitone, and it's sequencing, and it's clocking everything in the modular, all of the boxes, and the DAW. So everything. everything is coming out of the Oxy one. It is definitely the central key thing that I use for sure. Let's see here, master for the DAW. So yes, it is the master for the DAW when I'm recording live performance like this, and also when I use it with Ableton to sequence, but when I use the DAW by itself, I just use the internal clock. Courses are awesome. Thanks, Ed. Ed did the very first session of the live performance course. Now we got to get you, Ed, into the hybrid production course that starts in December. It's going to be a super fun one. That was the whole point of this right here, was to talk a little bit about hybrid production. Let's see, I would like to join the live hardware course, but even January is too early for that at the moment. But you are around, I assume. Yeah, so you can actually sign up for December, January, or February. So if you'd like to sign up for the February one, sign up now, get the 40% off discount. And then if something were to come up and you needed to move that and do it later on, I'll be happy to move it later on for you. So that way you can get the discount now by booking now, and then we can always push it off later if that doesn't work out for you, because I've had that happen. I have a student right now who had to push off because he and his wife are having a baby, so he needed the moment, so we're pushing it until later. So that's no problem at all. Take advantage of the discount now, and then I'm happy to push it off later for you. Let's see here. Important note about clocking to Ableton. Yes, so within Ableton, if you look right up here in the corner, up by the tempo, if you just click this EXT, that is the external sync for clock and transport. So now, if I was to push play here in Ableton, it doesn't do anything because it's waiting for an external signal. So now if I push play on the Oxy, it starts Ableton at the same time. So yeah, so that's that's the way you get the external sync from there. The HapX 2. What? There's a HapX 2? I think we're joking about that. Yeah, that would be great if the HapX 2 were portable. Wouldn't be so great for Oxy, but it would be great. But who knows? Maybe there'll be an Oxy 1 Mark II sometime soon. That would be cool. Let's see. Is the Digitone 2 taking a permanent position in your setup? Yes, it is. I actually have it on loan right now. I do a loan thing with Zounds. If you guys are familiar with Zounds, the online retailer, they loan me gear to try so that I can test things out, do videos on it and stuff like that, and then I can send it back to them if it doesn't work out. Which reminds me also, I never talk about this in my streams, and people said that I should and I forgot. There's also affiliate links in the description of the video. So if you want something like one of the hardware boxes or something like that, and you want to get it through Zounds, they do like monthly payments with no interest and stuff. That's pretty cool. Just use the affiliate link, and they're super generous about giving me a portion of that. And you don't have to pay any extra, and I get to make a little money on the side. And if it's something that's not one of the hardware boxes, like if it's something modular or something like that, there's also an affiliate link for Perfect Circuit down there. So go ahead and click on those, and yeah, it helps for sure. But to answer your question, yes, the Digitone 2 is taking a permanent spot in my setup for a few different reasons. I love the sound of it. Particularly some of the new engines. That FM drum engine, I have totally fallen in love with. I think it's amazing. It sounds really, really good. It has a lot of new features, but one of my favorites, which I can show you here, one of my favorite things that it has now is, and apparently it had this in the old one, but I couldn't even find it in there because it was so buried. And it only had 4 tracks, so this wasn't a big deal. So what this has is layering, meaning that, let's say we're on, I don't know, track 2, and then we go into the setup menu and we go down to layering. So right now, this is track 2, the one that has the little X on it. So that's the one that I have. And it's saying, which other tracks do you want this sequence that's on 2 to also trigger? So let's just pick 3 random ones like that, okay? So then we come back out of that, and then when we go into 2, every time we hit that, you'll see that it's also triggering these other ones, right? So let's go in here because we don't have the... If I have to bring this up here. You should be able to hear that, hopefully. Yeah. So that's just taking that one up. So then we've got also 6, 11, and 13. So let's turn up 6. And then let's turn up 11. And then let's turn up, oh, that was 13 and 11. So now if we were to go into track 2 and write a pattern and then hit play, nothing's playing because they're all still muted, but I can unmute 2 and then I can unmute individual tracks. Oops. Some of those already had patterns on them. Yeah. So now, all of those 3 are playing off of the sequence on 2. So if I go back into 2 and go into that sequence and I start changing notes, for example, so now that sequence on track 2 and those notes, those pitches are controlling all of that. So it becomes a layered new sound. And then because you can mute or unmute, so I can just use, or just these ones, or these ones together, or all of them together. Then you have individual control. You have individual control to mute individual layers of that sound, but then you also have the ability to go in and change that sound. You can pitch things so that you can then make chords. You can go in and add different effects to each layer. So maybe one layer has a delay, but the other layers don't. Maybe one layer has a reverb, but the other layers don't. So you can go in and individually modify individual layers of a sound, which is, I think, super powerful. And so it's one of the main reasons why the Digitone is going to stay in my thing. It also has now a master compressor like the Digitech had. It also has a master overdrive, which is great, kind of like what you have in the analog rhythm and on the Syntact, which is great for kind of saturating your main out. So you can kind of fill out your sound, but it also gives you, it can help kind of warm up. I hate to use that term because it's like that whole analog thing. It's like, it can help you warm up the digital sounds by saturating them and making them a little less precise. So you get some additional harmonics and some grit in them, which is great. I love that. It has all the effects that the other ones have now. So there's a chorus, there's everything like that. It has 3 LFOs per channel. It has, what else? Oh, it has the Euclidean sequencer as well. It has the keyboard fold and you can put it in key, which is really handy. So there's a whole bunch of things that it kind of has all of the upgrades that they did from the Syntact to the Digitech 2, moved all of those in as far as like the sequencer upgrades and the effects and all of those types of upgrades. And then they added in all those different voice engines. So it's not just FM, it's FM, wavetable, and digital. And it has the FM drum and the layering. I mean, the layering for me, that's a selling point enough. Like being able to do that is crazy powerful. So yeah, I love it. Anyway, that's that. Where are we at here? Need a few more hours sleep. All right, Dender, take care. Sign up for the course. I'd love to have you in there. Luca Ortega, arriving late to the party. Question, how you deal with MIDI sync? I use Acme Send, which is critical for that. Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably talking about latency. And again, if you're using, depending on the DAW that you're using, so Ableton's great, Bitwig is great. They have different tools for controlling latency by channel. But as far as MIDI sync itself goes, like I was mentioning prior, I have in Ableton, right up here, I have this set to external, meaning that Ableton is being clocked from an external source. And then if we go over to the bench over here, slide this out of the way, the logo, you have this cable right here on the side. That's USB-C that's going into the computer. So that means the Ableton that's in the computer is waiting for a clock from here. So when I hit play here, it starts Ableton as well. And then this is also clocking everything else. So all of it's being MIDI clocked from here. And the transport, so the sync for start, stop, and tempo and all that is coming from the Oxy One, and that's going into Ableton as well as to all the hardware. So everything is centered in that one machine and going out from that rather than doing things in a series. So yeah, so that's how I do MIDI. And so I sync everything together with MIDI. Cool. What else? What other questions do you guys have? Any other questions about the course, about this multi-tracking hardware into Ableton? Anything like that. Okay, Ableton as slave. Yeah, so that's how I have it set up right now. I can do it the other way around. So with that same USB-C cable, I could set it up so that Ableton is the master. It clocks the Oxy, and then the Oxy clocks all of the machines. And then I would just need to start Ableton every time I wanted to start and stop. I just prefer keeping that there so that I can get all set up and ready to perform and just hit play and I'm good to go. But it can work either way. So the Oxy can send clock out to Ableton, or it can receive clock from Ableton, and then it clocks everything else via a CV clock out and also a MIDI clock out. So I have both types of clock outs from the Oxy. So yeah, so there's that. Any other questions? Other questions about live performance, about hybrid recording, production setups, what to do with stuff once it's in here. This was just kind of a taste of everything because, again, I'm going to be doing the full course. The whole workshop starts the 5th of December, the first session of it. And December, January, and February are all available for sign up right now on my website. There's a link in the description for the video. And you can sign up for any of those at 40% off right now because of Black Friday. So jump in, get the discount now, even if you don't plan on doing it for a while. This would be a great thing. Let's see, thoughts on the Oxy sequencing the electrons versus their internal sequencer. Yeah, I use that a lot for a couple of different things. So I try to use each one for what their strength is. So where the electron sequencers are unmatched, it's for sequencing their internal devices in a way where you can parameter lock on each step. So being able to lock things to individual steps. So doing that is really great in the electron device. So if you're going to be doing things where, like for example, let's say you're sequencing drums and you want, like the third cymbal to have a little delay on it, and you can just lock that to that one step. Being able to parameter lock internally in the machine is really super powerful on the electron devices. It's really hard to do that from the Oxy. You can, because you can send CC messages, but then you have to know exactly what you're going to use. It's just a pain. It's not what it's made for. Now, what the Oxy is really strong for, and the reason why I use it to sequence tracks in the Electron boxes, is because I can randomly generate notes in key from the Oxy, which I can't do from inside the Electron boxes. So anything that I'm doing that's melodic, I like to do a lot of random generation, but I like to do it in key while I'm performing. And so I can do that from within the Oxy and send that to the Electron boxes. So then the Electron boxes become basically synth engines. So like the D-Tone 2 now is a 16 voice synth. So I can send 16 different tracks to it as mono synths, or I can do, chords or layering or whatever. So I can send it I can send all of that stuff from the aux, and I can sequence random or randomly generated notes in key. And I can't do that internally inside the Electron boxes. They don't do that. They don't do random note generation in key, and the aux does. So yeah, that's why I use it. I also like on the aux having a layout, and this is the same with the Hapax. It's the same if you use the Deluge for sequencing as well, to have different tracks next to each other, so you can see visually as you're performing, you can see how they interact one with the other. So you can see if things are overlapping on the same note, or if one note is kind of in between the other notes. So you can see that visually when you've got different layers of the synth next to each other, which you have in the aux and the Hapax and the Deluge and a few others. So yeah, that's why I use both. Luca, in the past video, you mentioned not to use a limiter for live. How do you use the analog heat? Do you compress, or is there an option to use different settings with no compression and just the saturation? Yes, so I do use the analog heat plus effects on my master out when I perform live. I do not use the compressor, I just turn it off. You can, within the heat, like each one of the effects, whether it's the compressor or any of the others, they basically act like pedals, and you can activate them or deactivate them and then save that as a preset. So I do not use a compressor on my main out, and I'll talk about why in a minute if you want me to. But the reason why I use it is I put a small amount of saturation, and I put, well, actually, I can show you exactly why I use this, because now we have, let's see here, if I go to, I don't have that one right now. So never mind, I won't show it to you this way. I'll just tell you. So I, generally when I master, I like to have saturation to help fill out harmonics, to fill out spaces between notes and tones and stuff. I like to have a high pass filter really low so that I can cut out super low end. I also like to boost the low and the high a little so that I can get a richer, harder low end, and then also kind of balance that out with the high end, and then it makes the mids kind of a bit lower, and it makes the song, my music tends to be low, high, strong, and then the mid is a bit lower. So I usually do that when I master. And I also, using the utility plugin on my mastering chain, I mono everything below 200 hertz so that when I'm in a club, the low end is all in mono and it sounds really good. I can do all of those things with the heat plus effects. So it has a bass mono function. So one of the things is able to mono everything below 200 hertz. So, or you can change that cutoff. So it could be 100 hertz or 250 or wherever you want to do it. Anything below will be in mono. So I use that. I use the saturator in order to saturate and fill out those spaces and make the tracks sound more full. And I use a high pass filter, and I add a little resonance. So I put the high pass filter at about 25 hertz, and then I'll add some resonance so that the boost of the resonance is at about between 40 and 50 hertz. So it gives you a little boost in your subby low end, low kick. So it makes them really powerful in a club system. And then I add a bit of high end with the EQ in order to counteract that and make those kind of balance out. And that's what I do. Some drive as well. And then I save that as a preset, and I just leave it like that. I don't ever touch it unless I decide I need to change one of those things, which I usually don't. But no, it has a compressor. That was something that they added in the Heat Plus effects, and I don't use it because I think it's a bad idea to use a compressor on your end of chain for a live performance. I think it makes your sound, it makes your overall sound worse than, and instead of making it sound better. So yeah, I think compressors on your main out in a live performance, I think are a bad idea in general. So I don't use them. And happy to chat more about that if you want, but otherwise I can just leave it at that because I've talked about that before. What else? Other questions? Anyone else have something else interesting to ask or something you're curious about? Yes, it's a bad idea. We agree. We agree with each other, Luca. it is a bad idea to have a compressor on your master in a live set. Compressors have their place, and they're very good for certain things, but for hardware live performance, there's way too many people that think you need a compressor, and it's in general a very bad idea. And the only way it's not a very bad idea is if you're using it in such a slight amount that you're not seeing any improvement anyway. So it's not improving your sound at all. So if you're using it in a way that's positive, so you're way more likely to mess up your sound than you are to make your sound better if you use a compressor on your master with a live set. Have I ever used Access Virus TI? I have played around with one, but I've never owned one. I've never had one. Seems like an amazing synth. I loved it. I had a lot of fun when I played with it. But no, I've never owned one. Do you have one? Is it cool? Do you like it? I've heard they're really cool. I saw on the store website in one of their Pink Noise videos, there was one of the artists on there that was using Virus TI, and it was cool. Like it sounded great. They were using it for a lot of different sounds because it's multi-timbral. So yeah, it sounded really cool. I really loved it. So anyway, one more little plug here. Sign up for the course, the courses. There's actually 3 different versions. I should have mentioned this before. So there's the hardware performance course, which is, again, a month-long course, a lot of one-on-one and group live sessions where we, Q&A stuff and all of that. There's one-on-one personal Zoom sessions where we can go over anything you want to go over. There's weekly feedback on performance videos that you send me of you performing. And there's a private online community of just people who have taken the courses, which is great. Everybody's becoming a group of friends on there, which is a lot of fun. And then you have access to about 50 videos or so that are not available on YouTube. They're not things that I've put out anywhere else. And they're very kind of tailored, and it's a real progression of a whole system for how to perform improvised live hardware, perform hardware in a live improvised way. Then there's the performance course, which is what we were kind of talking about here. This was a touch on that, on how you can use hardware in your production, how you can use production in your hardware and go back and forth, and how they complement one another. So this is a hybrid production course, and that's available now as well. And then finally, there's a video-only version of the performance course, which means if you don't want to do all of the group calls and have access to the online group, and you just want to do an online video course, you can do that as well and save some money, and just go on and watch the videos at your own pace and do that however you like. So all 3 of those are available for 40% off right now because of Black Friday. So if you go to circlelive.com/courses and you enter in Black Friday at checkout, you get 40% off whichever of those courses. When you sign up for the video only course, you have access immediately to the videos, and you have access ongoing to those. So you can do that at your own pace whenever. If you want to sign up for one of the other courses, I have December, January, and February for both of the full workshops are all available for sign up with the discount right now. And so if you sign up for any of those now, it can be for one of the later courses and you can still get the discount. And as I mentioned before, if you needed to push back, if for some reason it wasn't going to happen at that point, you can also go later. Just send me a message and I'm happy to work it out and push it later. Let's see here. It has a Moog filters in it. Yeah, they sound great. Let's see, I'm into live hardware, but I don't use modular, mainly Electron and other vintage stuff. About the course, is it mainly modular oriented? I love modular, but I'm not that fluent in my current set. No, it is not at all gear specific. There is a section about modular, and I will relate things to modular, but I also relate them to the fundamentals, and the thing that the course is about are valid for, I've had people take the course that are doing it just on one single groove box, and it's their first ever piece of hardware. So I've got people like that, and then I've had people in the course that have been performing live for a long time. They have rooms full of gear. They have massive hardware setups with modular and different synths and drum machines or whatever, and it works for them as well. So it's really a thing that is about how to build a setup, how to set it up in a way that's conducive to performing live in an improvised way, and then a whole bunch of systems for how to actually improvise live. Like what you can do to play live in a free-flowing, improvised way. So it's not genre specific and it's not gear specific. It applies across all types of gear and across all genres of music. Well, it's all for electronic music, so I'm not like teaching you how to play guitar and improvise on that. That's for another day. That goes back to my old days of playing guitar when I was a kid. But no, so it's really improvised electronic music played live on whatever gear. And what's cool too, I would say, if you don't have any modular but you're interested in it, one of the things the course has done for some people is it has helped them figure out what modular they may want to get into without wasting a bunch of money in it. And for some people, it made them realize they thought they wanted modular for a certain thing, but after taking the course, they realized they didn't need the modular because they've already got other things, or their workflow style worked well with hardware boxes instead of modular. So it can be really good for that as well. So again, not gear specific and not genre specific. So yeah, come join us. We would love to have you. It would be tons and tons of fun. All right. Well, let's see here. I think ad playing right now. So yeah, so I think if you don't have any other questions, if you do, feel free to pop them in. But if you don't have any other questions, we can just call it a day there. We'll do some more of these. I'm going to be doing a bit more now that I have this kind of a setup, showing a bit more about how I record things and how I use things. And I may do some videos. If you want some videos specifically on production stuff in the box that's not necessarily hardware related, put that in the comments down below. Because I've gone back and forth about whether I should do those kind of videos or not, because there's a lot of people out there that do Ableton production videos. But I look at things kind of in a different way when I produce, so you might want those. But yeah, so if you'd like some more of those, definitely put that in the comments to the video and let me know. And if you have any questions that come up after this live stream, or if you're not watching this live, if you're just watching this on the recorded version, feel free to pop the questions into the comments of the video, and I'm happy to answer those. And give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, and so that way we can get this info out there to more and more people. All right. Well, thank you guys all very much. I really appreciate your time and for joining in. There's been a bunch of you, and thanks for the questions and the comments. And hope to see as many of you as possible in the courses. Sign up today to get 40% off. And other than that, have a great week. Enjoy yourselves. Make some music and have tons of fun. Thank you all very much. Hey from London. Awesome teacher. Thank you. The Walter White of techno. I get that all the time, Walter White. That's pretty funny. But thank you guys. I appreciate it very much, and have a wonderful rest of your evening. And I look forward to seeing you on the next stream. Take care. Peace.